The year is somewhere around 1000 CE, 1,000 years after the birth of Christ, 500 years before Columbus would stumble onto Caribbean islands and claim he'd found a new world. On a beach in what's now Newfoundland, an indigenous person is checking fishing nets. It's early morning. Routine. Just another day. And then, they see it. A ship. Unlike anything they've ever seen. A massive wooden vessel with a single square sail. And carved on the prow, a dragon's head. They run to warn their village, because they can see figures on that ship. People. Strangers. Strangers from across an ocean they didn't know anyone could cross. For 15,000 years, the peoples of this land had lived, adapted, thrived, isolated from the rest of humanity by two massive oceans. But on this morning, that isolation ended. The old world had found the new world. Or maybe, the new world had just discovered the old. To understand how Vikings ended up in Canada, we need to back up a few hundred years. Around 800 CE, Scandinavian peoples, we call them Vikings, though they called themselves Norse, started expanding outward from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Why? Lots of reasons. Population pressure, political conflicts, the search for new farmland, adventure, greed, the usual human motivations. In Europe, they became famous, or infamous, as raiders, monasteries, coastal towns, river settlements. The Vikings would appear suddenly, attack, take valuables and captives, and disappear before any defense could be mounted. There's a prayer from this period. From the fury of the Northmen, O Lord, deliver us. Around 870 CE, they settled Iceland. 900 kilometers of open ocean from Norway, but they made it. Within decades, thousands of Norse had moved there. Then, around 985 CE, a man named Eric the Red, exiled from Iceland for murder, sailed west and discovered land. He named it Greenland. Now, this was marketing genius, because Greenland is not very green. It's mostly ice and rock, but Eric wanted to attract settlers, so he gave it an appealing name. And it worked. Settlers came. They established farms along the southwestern coast, raising sheep and cattle in the brief summer months. It was marginal living, but it was a living. And from Greenland's western coast on clear days, you could sometimes see something, land, across the water. According to the Norse sagas, the epic stories written down centuries later, a merchant named Bjarni Herjolfsson was the first to actually see North America. Around 986 CE, his ship was blown off course while sailing to Greenland. He spotted land to the west, forested land. But he didn't land. He just turned around and sailed back to Greenland. When he told people what he'd seen, most thought he was a coward for not investigating. But one man listened with interest. Leif Erikson, son of Erik the Red, the founder of the Greenland colony. Around the year 1000 CE, Leif bought Bjarni's ship, gathered a crew of about 35 men, and sailed west to find this mysterious land. And he found it. First, a land of flat stones and glaciers. He called it Helluland, land of flat stones, probably Baffin Island. Then, a forested land with white sandy beaches. He called it Markland, land of forests, probably Labrador. And finally, a place with meadows, salmon-filled rivers, and timber. He called it Vinland, land of wine, or land of meadows, depending on how you translate the Old Norse. This was Newfoundland, and we know this isn't just legend, because we've found the settlement, L'Anse aux Meadows, at the northern tip of Newfoundland. Discovered in 1960 by Norwegian explorers Helge and Anne Stein Ingstad. 8 buildings, Norse construction style, a forge for working iron, something indigenous peoples in the region didn't do. Butternuts from trees that only grow further south, meaning they explored beyond this base camp. This was a workshop, a base for exploring further, a place to repair ships, process timber, stage expeditions. And it proves, beyond any doubt, that Europeans reached North America 500 years before Columbus. But they weren't alone here. The sagas call the indigenous peoples they met Skraelings, a not particularly nice Norse word meaning something like barbarians or screechers. At first, there was trade. The sagas describe indigenous peoples approaching in skin boats, probably kayaks. They traded furs for red cloth and milk products. But then, conflict. The Norse sagas tell us that the conflicts started small: misunderstandings, cultural differences. Maybe the indigenous peoples objected to these strangers setting up a permanent camp without permission. Maybe the Norse tried to take resources without asking. We don't know exactly what sparked the violence, but we know it happened. The sagas describe attacks by the Skraelings. The Norse had metal weapons and armor, which gave them an advantage in direct combat. But the indigenous peoples had superior numbers and knowledge of the terrain. And here's a crucial detail from the sagas. The indigenous peoples had weapons that terrified the Vikings. The sagas describe something like a large dark ball being hurled from a pole, making a terrible noise when it struck. We're not entirely sure what this was. Maybe a type of stone weapon, maybe a leather sack filled with rocks and thrown from a sling or pole. Whatever it was, it worked. The Vikings, who had raided and conquered across Europe, were genuinely frightened. And they made a decision. This land had everything they needed: timber, meadows, fish, game, everything that was scarce in Greenland. But it also had people. People who didn't want them here, and there weren't enough Norse to fight a sustained conflict. So they left. After just a few years, maybe a decade at most, the Norse abandoned Vinland. They took their iron tools, their valuable goods, and they sailed back to Greenland. The indigenous peoples reclaimed the area. Maybe they tore down the buildings. Maybe they just let them rot. Either way, within a generation or two, the land showed no trace that Europeans had ever been there. The Norse made a few more attempts. The sagas mention other expeditions, but none of them established permanent settlements. And then the Greenland colony itself started to fail. By the 1400s, the Greenland Norse had either died out or sailed back to Iceland. The settlements were abandoned, and with them went the knowledge of Vinland. In Europe, the story of Vinland became just that: a story, a legend. Old sagas told around fires. Most people didn't believe it was real. Meanwhile, in the land they'd tried to claim, life went on. The indigenous peoples continued to live, trade, build, thrive. 500 years passed. And then, in the late 1400s, something changed in Europe. New technologies, better ships, new trade routes needed, and a growing belief that the world was larger than anyone had thought. The Ottoman Empire had closed the eastern trade routes to Asia. Europeans wanted spices, silk, and other goods from China and India. But the old routes were blocked, so they started looking for new routes, around Africa, or maybe west, across the Atlantic. And this time, when Europeans came to North America, they wouldn't leave. The Portuguese and Spanish came first, exploring the coasts, fishing the Grand Banks, the rich fishing grounds off Newfoundland. Basque whalers set up temporary camps. Every summer, they'd sail across, harvest whales and cod, then sail home with their catch. They didn't settle, just seasonal work. Then, in 1497, an Italian navigator named Giovanni Caboto, we know him as John Cabot, sailing under an English flag, reached the coast of Newfoundland. He planted the English flag and claimed the land for King Henry VII of England. Never mind that people already lived there. By European legal thinking of the time, if Christians hadn't claimed it, it was up for grabs. Cabot reported rich fishing grounds and a route to Asia. He was wrong about the Asia part. He made a second voyage in 1498 and disappeared. Lost at sea. We don't know what happened to him. But his voyages established England's claim to North America, a claim they'd use centuries later. Through the early 1500s, European fishing fleets became common off Canada's coast. Portuguese, Basque, Breton, English. Every summer, hundreds of ships. And inevitably, they met the indigenous peoples. At first, just brief encounters, trading, metal tools and cloth for furs. Both sides curious but cautious. Neither side knew that these brief encounters would lead to centuries of trade, alliance, conflict, and catastrophic change. And then, in 1534, a French navigator arrived with a mission. His name was Jacques Cartier. And, unlike the fishermen who came and left, he had orders from the King of France to explore, claim territory, and find the route to Asia. He wouldn't just trade and leave. He wanted to explore, to map, to claim. And when he sailed into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, he started a chain of events that would change everything. April 20th, 1534. 3 ships leave the port of Saint-Malo, France, commanded by Jacques Cartier, an experienced navigator who'd sailed to Brazil and Newfoundland before. King Francis I had given him clear instructions: find a northwest passage to Asia, claim new lands for France, and find gold if possible. The crossing takes just 20 days, remarkably fast. By early May, Cartier reaches Newfoundland. He explores the coast, mapping as he goes. He's not the first European here. Fishermen have been coming for decades, but he's the first to map it systematically. Then he sails into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and now he's in waters few Europeans have seen. His journals describe what he sees: dense forests right to the water's edge, rivers teeming with salmon, seals and walruses on rocky shores, flocks of seabirds so thick they darken the sky. This is a rich land, a land worth claiming. And then they meet people. Mi'kmaq people approach in canoes. They hold up furs: beaver, otter, marten. They're gesturing. They want to trade. Cartier's crew is nervous. They don't know these people, don't know their intentions. Some of the sailors fire their guns in the air. Warning shots. The Mi'kmaq are startled, but they don't flee. They've seen Europeans before. They know about trade. Eventually, both sides calm down. Trading happens. The Mi'kmaq offer furs. Cartier offers metal knives, axes, and red cloth. Both sides seem pleased. The Mi'kmaq leave with metal tools that will revolutionize their lives. Metal blades that don't break. Axes that can fell trees in minutes instead of hours. They think they've gotten an amazing deal. Cartier sails on, around the Gaspé Peninsula, up the coast, mapping, noting good harbors, claiming land. He reaches Chaleur Bay, Bay of Warmth, and names it for the hot July weather. And here, he meets a different group: Iroquoian people from Stadacona, what will one day be Quebec City. They're here for the summer fishing season, harvesting salmon and eels. Their leader, a man named Donnacona, approaches with his sons Domagaya and Taignoagny. They're curious about these strange visitors. Cartier gives them gifts: knives, a red hat for Donnacona. They seem pleased. Then, on July 24, 1534, Cartier does something that will have enormous consequences. He erects a massive wooden cross, 10 meters tall. On it, the French coat of arms and the inscription, "Long live the King of France." At first, the Iroquoians watch curiously, but then they understand. This isn't just a religious symbol. Donnacona confronts Cartier. He gestures at the land, at his people, at the cross. The meaning is clear. This is our land. You can't just claim it. It's a tense moment. Cartier's men have guns. The Iroquoians have superior numbers. Cartier gestures, trying to calm things down. He indicates the cross is just a navigation marker. Nothing to worry about, just showing him where to sail when he returns. Donnacona doesn't fully believe him, but what can he do? These strangers have weapons that spit fire and death. Better to wait, to watch. Then Cartier does something even worse. He invites Donnacona's sons, Domagaya and Taignoagny, onto his ship. "Come see the amazing things we have," he gestures. "Gifts for you." The young men board. They're curious. They've never seen a European ship up close. And then the ship starts moving. Sails raised, pulling away from shore. Donnacona runs to the water's edge, shouting. Cartier has kidnapped his sons. Cartier's excuse, written in his journal, is that he's taking them to France to learn French so they can serve as interpreters next time. But the truth is simpler. He's kidnapped them, taken them hostage. As proof to the king that he'd actually met people, as interpreters he can control. And with this act, this kidnapping, Cartier establishes a pattern that will repeat for centuries. He arrives in France in September, just 4 months after leaving. The voyage is considered a success. The two kidnapped sons spend the winter in France, learning French, seeing cities, castles, cathedrals. They must be terrified, confused, homesick. But Cartier presents them to the king as evidence of his discoveries, and he starts planning a second voyage. This time, he'll go further, up the river they've told him about, the river that leads to a great settlement called Stadacona, and beyond that, they say, an even larger place called Hochelaga. Cartier thinks maybe this river leads to Asia, or at least to great wealth. He has no idea that the river leads to the heart of a continent, to a land that will become New France, and he definitely has no idea of the catastrophe he's about to unleash. Cartier returns, but this time he brings something invisible, something deadly. European diseases arrive in North America: smallpox, measles, influenza. Entire villages will be wiped out, not by weapons, but by germs their immune systems have never seen. Cartier will sail up the St. Lawrence to Hochelaga, the island that will become Montreal. He'll see a thriving indigenous city of thousands. And then he'll face a Canadian winter, unprepared, trapped, dying of scurvy. And when he finally escapes back to France, he'll take more hostages, including Donnacona himself.